All right, that is former ODM National Chair and long-serving Member of Parliament for Tinderet constituency, Honorable Henry Kosgei. They're outlining his manifesto for his gubernatorial bid in Nandi County. Gentlemen, Henry Kosgei made headlines earlier this year when he threw himself back into the political limelight after taking a short hiatus after the ICC saga. Now he's back into politics. Ndegwa, you've been shaking your head during that press statement. What do you have to say?
Well, just one highlight. I've heard him mention about games and athletics and football and all that. And I've remembered in 1989 when he was heading the All-African Games. And Kenyans have good memories of what Henry Kosgei did, that those games never took place, that there was no accountability, there was no transparency. All of a sudden, he has had a new dawn and a new revelation that he can do what he never did in 1987 in Nandi County. Besides, to me, I think Henry Kosgei is a faded individual in the politics, both national and the local politics that he's now intending to play in. And of course, it doesn't seem to have absorbed the ICC shock. And he doesn't have that face of acceptance in the Kenyan politics. So I'm still waiting to see how he's going to turn around the Nandi politics and become the favorite candidate vis-a-vis the current governor. But to me, it shows that Kenyans have not invested in trying to get a new crop of leadership. In the sense that it's only the Henry Kosgeis of this country who still have an opportunity to run for political offices. You're still not having new blood coming over. And so I don't know whether Kenyans are not able to think outside the box or inside the box or without the box, that it has to be Henry Kosgei. And this is going to be repeated all over.
Right, this was, he's launching his, gubernatorial bid for Nandi County. He's been missing in action in the political scene for quite a while. Your thoughts on his candidature?
Well, every Kenyan, including Ndegwa, can actually go to Nandi and run for that position. So if he thinks it's not going to offer any good value, he can actually go and run. But when you look at Henry Kosgei, you're immediately reminded of Chapter 6. And maybe as a nation, we now need to delete that Chapter 6. So you jump from 5, you go straight to Chapter 7. He's not been found guilty of anything, but there's as indicated, the All-African Games fiasco, where a lot of resources were entrusted in his ministry, and the resources just disappeared. Nobody has been held accountable as we speak right now. And also there's the small matter of the Kenya National Assurance. And when the company collapsed, again, he was the chairman. Nobody has been found guilty, but he's still here. And then, of course, when you look at the speech that he was reading, he was struggling to read that speech, and it reminds you of the bureaucracy we have in Kenya. He gave the instructions to a young chap who's probably done law or economics to prepare the speech for him. So it was really very uninspiring. And it indicates that there's a deficit of leadership in Kenya, that serious people who are supposed to go into this space and take Kenya to the next level are missing in action. Young professionals, for instance, at his age, he's been around, he's been a minister for so many years, but you cannot remember him for anything spectacular. There's some people, there's some politicians, you mention the name, then you say this politician has done something to take Kenya to the next level. When you mention Henry Kosgei right now, you look at somebody who takes advantage of political opportunities, because for him, he has to be with the government of the day. If probability of Raila Odinga becoming president is very high, he'll be no DM. If right now the tide shifts to in the favor of Musalia Mudavadi, he will quickly join Amani National Congress. Or if they favor Moses Wetangula, he'll go to Ford Kenya. And this is the kind of mediocrity we have in the Kenyan leadership system. Because when he was reading his speech, I'm sure people at home were yawning, or maybe that's the time now they go look for a cup of tea, because he's going to offer nothing new. And unfortunately, according to the opinion polls, his probability of becoming the governor for Nandi is almost 1, because the serving governor, Lagat, is actually number 3. So again, people in Nandi are going to have this huge burden of having this gentleman probably for the next 10 years as a governor, and they shouldn't hold their breath. And it's not only limited to Nandi, it cuts across the entire nation, which is that's why it's very refreshing. There are people in Busia yesterday took a decision that they want to change the leadership. Because when you look at the 47 governors we have today, majority of them really have not done anything. They've done the bare minimum. And again, it's not only limited to the governors. It also goes to the National Assembly, it goes to the Senate, and it also goes to the national leadership. That when we elect leaders, they just want to do the bare minimum, and they want us to give them a pat on the back.
Let's focus on the very fact that, like you mentioned, according to opinion polls, the probability of him winning this is 1, the incumbent governor at number 3. What does that say about the incumbent governor, first of all, and then the people of Nandi?
Well, number one, it means that the governors we have today, probably they don't know why they're in office. And when you look at the reports given by the Auditor General, they shine in impunity, mediocrity, and corruption. If you wanted to rate them on their ability to steal from Wanjiko, is extremely high. But again, in Kenya, we've given law and order backseat. There's very good evidence that you've actually stolen resources, but nothing happens. Like today, there's a very interesting story in the page 2 of the Standard.
We'll be taking a look at that.
Some lady whose bank account was hovering around 1,000 shillings, all of a sudden it jumps to millions, and nobody takes notice. The local banks cannot even report the same to central bank, because it's very basic that if your account has been hovering around 1,000 bob, like most Kenyans do, and all of a sudden it starts going to millions, and people are ferrying money in gunny bags or in wheelbarrows, and the banks, give it blind attention, you begin to wonder whether, as a nation, we respect the rule of law and order. How come the local banks did not take note of that? And where is central bank seated all this time? So for the governors, they've perfected the art of stealing from Wanjiko. But again, for the voters, in as much as we are a very literate society, I think we've resigned the fact that, okay, we are going to have a crop of leaders, and everything they are going to do, they'll be stealing. And I think that's what they refer to as the Stockholm Syndrome, that you fall in love with the guy who is holding you hostage. So now we've been chained by our politicians, and we are very happy to see them in choppers and branded, top of the range vehicles, and we clap for them, not knowing that the reason why they're in office is to catalyze our socioeconomic development.
Right.
Like, for instance, if you ask people in Nandi, are they better off 4 years? I mean, they've had a governor now for 4 years. Are they better off? No. But are the MCS better off? Of course. They're buying hotels all over the world. Are the county ministers better off? Of course. They're buying properties all over the world. But for the poor taxpayer, maybe in Nandi is Chebet, Chebet has just been wallowing in poverty, and there's nothing they can do.
Right. Let's focus on the process of getting these leaders into office. And this is what the party primaries that ODM has kicked off are about. And on the front page of the papers of the dailies this morning is that row that jolted the ODM primaries in Busia and Bungoma. Let's begin with you, Ndegwa.
Yes.
What lessons can the big political parties learn from the Busia fiasco?
Allow me to begin from where this mass has stopped. And he mentioned something very interesting that is in our constitution, and that is chapter 6. And I think Kenyans, I agree with him, we need to start deleting or amending that chapter to make sure that we don't have anything that gives the directions on how leadership should be viewed. But this, we suffered a big blow in 2012 when people went to court in respect to the current president's and the deputy president's status to run for presidency, while they still had the matters they had at the ICC. You remember the court said that because of the presumption of innocence, then they could not be barred to run for the presidency and the deputy presidency. That is when the rain started beating us, and that is the case that watered down the intent, the aspirations, and the norms Kenyans wanted to achieve when they enacted chapter 6 of the Constitution. The reason being, we were told that unless you have been proved guilty, the chapter 6 does not apply to you.
Innocent until proven guilty.
But the question is, the framers of our Constitution, what threshold did they want to place on chapter 6? Was it the threshold of being proved guilty beyond any reasonable doubt? Was it to be on the balance of probability, or was it to be on mere perception? We still have not been able to come up with clear definition of the threshold. And that's what you can see, even in the party primaries, leaders are doing all sorts of maneuvers, which by large extent are actually outside the confinement of the law, and they end up getting away with it. We have seen the governor, it's called the guy, it's called Obando.
Obando, yes.
We have seen what he did, and he's going to be a candidate. We have seen what Elizabeth Ogoro did. She's now a candidate in another political party. The question is, when shall we ever get leadership that is defined by the confinement of what people expect in respect to Chapter 6? And I think that, again, it's one of where the Kenyans needs to debate upon.
The question would be, where does the buck stop? Who now should ensure that Chapter 6 is implemented in all the political prospects
we
have?
We were in court on Wednesday for the Munya's case. Munya has been sued in Meru High Court by a petitioner, and the petitioner is saying that Munya needs not to be nominated, even cleared by the IBC, because he has a lot of unanswered questions from the Auditor General reports. And that cuts across all the governors. So the court was asking us, whose responsibility is it to implement Chapter 6? Because when the members of parliament went to legislate, and that was done by the 10th parliament, they removed the obligations of checking on Chapter 6 from courts, and they placed it on the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And they said, and that is the jurisprudence in Kenyan laws, that unless you exhaust the available mechanisms that is available and has been placed upon on the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, you cannot rush to court to challenge one's candidature on grounds of ethics and corruption. We all know what Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is made of, and the extent in which they can go to investigate these matters, especially when it touches on politicians. The day you touch on politicians, the next day, Wabukala, the chairman, will be out. The two other commissioners will also be out. You'll be told Wabukala never gave audited accounts of his church, and everybody else will have some issues. So the 10th Parliament made it clear that it would become so much difficult to implement Chapter 6. And this is why, even connecting it with the question that you put, issues of party primaries, we are going to have a big challenge, because our politics is defined by hooliganism that is not checked by law, is defined by mediocrity that is not checked in law, is defined by he who shouts most, and the persons who has the baddest malpractices in terms of contesting for that particular post.
Right. I mean, and as it is, with regard to Busia, we've seen the ODM disciplinary committee put Ojamong and Otuoma on the spot, telling them that they will be watched, that no violence will be condoned on their part. But Dismas, considering what happened, what really can political parties learn, and how is this precedence going to reflect on ODM leader Raila Odinga?
Well, you know, when you look at the figures coming from Busia, just on the face of it, you can't help but see, you know, I don't know, people say daylight robbery. Because when you look at the Ojamong win, it's anchored only on two constituencies. That's Teso South and North. And it's very interesting that whereas in other constituencies, the average voter turnout is around 40%, for those two constituencies on average is 80%. And all of a sudden, is now declared winner. Because at some stage, 90% of the results were out, and Dr. Tuma was leading. And then there was a closed session of about 11 hours, and then Ojamong emerges as the winner. Obviously, there's no way in Kenya you can have that kind of voter turnout in a party primary. And even looking at Teso South, one of the constituencies where he got, where there was about 77% voter turnout, the MP, Mary Emases, is a Jubilee member of Parliament. So you would actually assume that most of the registered voters there are Jubilee members, not ODM. But you see now they came out in truckloads and they came and voted for Ojamong. And you know, really, this is, even if you're a layman, you can actually see there is a mischief. And there are some sentiments that one needs to take into active consideration. Because our old governor, by the name Ojamong, when he was doing a media conference in the morning, he used some unsavory language on Otuma, because he said, this is a cow that will be fattening for slaughter. How can you refer to your competition in that manner? And then, of course, you know, there is fake news and alternative facts associated with him. That's all, in as much as it's part of propaganda, which is a very key strategy for anybody to win an election, but we must pay attention to that. And I think the lesson for Mr. Raila Odinga, because, you know, we are told that we have a disciplinary committee within ODM, you have an elections born within ODM, and anybody who's been around politicians knows that this is a special purpose vehicle. The person running ODM is Raila Odinga. Nobody will take a decision without consulting Raila Odinga. And I like the way the people in Busia have come out. They told Raila Odinga in black and white that if you are going to manipulate this election, we are not going to take it without a fight. We are going to fight. And it's important for Raila Odinga to let people express their will. If they want Otuma as the next governor, Raila Odinga cannot impose Sospito Jamong based on the fact that he used to be his PA, he used to manage his business and probably their friends. He must let the will of the people prevail. And if Raila Odinga wants to force any candidate, and as we are from history, in the previous 2 elections, when he has tried to force candidates on the populace, at the end of the day, there is a voter apathy. So if he's looking for a nice turnout in Busia for the next presidential candidate, he must let the people's will come out. And the fines that were imposed on Governor Obado, over 2 million Kenyan shillings, an MCA will tell you that's peanuts. If you go to the story from Bungoma, 2 million for a governor is peanuts. When you engage in violence, there's one of the bodyguards shoots at Governor Joe. So there's violence, property has been destroyed, there's even potential death, and all that you can be told to pay is a fine of 2 million.
What would you expect? What fine would you expect?
For me, you know, the purpose of a fine, as a lawyer Ndego would indicate, is to be very prohibitive so that you don't engage in that thing alone. So now everybody within ODM knows that I'll cause as much violence as I want, but on the worst case scenario, it's going to be 2 million bob. I would have expected them to impose a penalty of even 50 million or 100 million so that it can be a lesson to any other person who wants to engage in violence or even expel him from the political party. Because you see, you have Governor Joe going to Migori, and Obado, now it's been confirmed, he was the architect of the violence, and then you're only given 2 million bob. When you look at these governors, you tell him to pay a fine of 2 million bob, he'll ask his personal assistant to go get the money from the trunk of his car. So that's nothing really to worry. And we must have very serious penalties to bar these people. And also for Governor Joe, when he went to Migori, in as much as you're going for a political rally and you're the deputy party leader, you are going to another governor's territory. So best practices and manners demand that you actually inform him in advance that I'll be coming to your part of the world, and you actually go to his office for a courtesy call, you do photo opportunities, and then you go do your rally.
I mean, this especially considering the controversy with the president going to the coastal region and Governor Joho taking a lot of, you know, being very angry about the fact that he was not informed as the governor of the coastal region. But I'd like us to move away from that and take a look at page 4 and 5 of the Standard, a special report here on why opposition parties are not a viable option for Kenyans. And this report here says that public dissatisfaction with government performance does not necessarily translate into perceptions that opposition political outfits could do a better job. It also moves on to say that opposition parties might actually put off potential voters by consistently criticizing the ruling administration rather than offering viable solutions as to what they can do instead. And this is reflecting highly with the opposition outfit NASA, of course, with the 4 affiliate parties in it. What can Kenyans take away from this, Ndegwa?
You know, that analysis in that paper, I read it and it was very interesting, especially when they say that the ODM, or rather the NASA fraternity will keep away voters because they keep on bashing government. But the thing is, even government bashes the opposition. There's no time when government has actually told us that this is how we need to sort out your issues. Can I give an example of now what was called the government portal? The opposition has come up with clear and proper data as to whether or not there is 7,000 kilometers of roads, there is 5.5 million connectivity. So they have also been able to give the accounts of how they perceive it. So all what we're trying to see here is we can neither trust government nor can we trust the opposition. Because whatever the government is telling us, data is giving us a different opinion and a different position. For instance, the controversial connectivity of electricity. When you look at what NASA is telling us and the data they have been able to clarify, you tend to think there could be a bit of truth. But the unfortunate thing in Kenyan politics is that it's crowned with issues and laced with issues of deceit. None of them is ever giving us the correct position as it ought to be. So we can neither trust government, because government has, first of all, been founded on misconceptions and the inability to tell the Kenyans the truth of the matter. Can I give an example of the laptop? Who would think that government would give a false promise to Kenyans? You see, the way I understand government and the way government should be run is that people should have faith in the government of the day. But if a government of the day is founded on an utter lie and the inability to deliver what they have been able to promise the people, then people will not have confidence in it. Where are the stadiums that government promised us? So it is not true that when the opposition puts questions on the delivery of government, it's not true that they are trying to bash them.
I mean, but many times Kenyans would feel that, yes, there's issues with the ruling administration. Here comes the opposition trying to cement those issues and really bring them out, but they're not really offering any viable solutions. So all we have is problems from the government, from the opposition, and nobody in between to give us solutions.
And that's why I'm saying Kenyan's goose is cooked. The reason being, we're still having the Raila Odingas and the Uhuru Kenyatas of this world. We don't have any fresh blood coming in to breathe some new bit of hope. We Kenyans are hopeless, be it from government side, be it from opposition side. Because the only thing that you can see is bashing. And being led by the...
Let's hear from you. I mean, do you agree with this? This constant bashing by the opposition really does not attract voters to their side.
This article would make sense if we were in the UK or in the US, where people vote based on ideas or ideologies or philosophies. That are, if you're, say, looking at the Republicans, you know, these are conservatives. You're looking at the Democrats, you know, these are liberals. Like, for instance, a good case in mind is the Obamacare. The conservatives, for the longest time, said that as soon as we take office, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare on the funding proposals. Because in that part of the world, people are rational voters. They look at a presidential candidate and your manifesto, and they vote account on that. Like, for instance, all along, Trump has been saying, I'm going to reduce the size of government in Washington so that, you know, we let demand and supply work. In Kenya, it doesn't work that way. In Kenya, we don't have, first of all, we don't have opposition parties. We have tribal political parties. Like, for instance, whether or not the laptop is a reality, people in central Kenya are going to vote for President Kenyatta. Maybe the only thing which may happen, there may be voter apathy. They may not wake up early in the morning to go and cast their ballots. Whether or not Raila Odinga criticizes the government of the day, people from Luo Nyanza are going to follow instructions from him. So when this article says that if these opposition parties keep on bashing the government every single day, there may be voter apathy and people are not going to respond, I think that's probably part of a spin, and this is very good propaganda. Because in Kenya, I mean, for somebody who comes from Kibera, who is a fanatical supporter for Raila Odinga, it doesn't matter what President Kenyatta does.
Right.
President Kenyatta can even deliver roads from here to the moon, but folks from Kibera will not appreciate that. And if you want to confirm this, you go to Rarieda and ask Raphael Tuju. Raphael Tuju is on record as one of the few leaders in Kenya who had a development matrix, and people saw what he was doing. But at the moment he had divergent views with Raila Odinga, he was told to take a walk. Actually, it was even very interesting that even got clinics that were taken to Rarieda to treat patients for free. But because he had different opinions with Raila Odinga, he was told, plug your clinic, take it elsewhere. And I understand he gave the clinic to Kraitu Murungi. So people in Meru are enjoying that service. And for us Kenyans, the moment we wake up and agree that our tribal leaders are not offering us any value, That's the only time this article will begin to make sense.
To Kenyans. All right,
Yeah.
I'd like us to move away from the Standard and still focus on some politics. Page 6 of the Daily Nation. Embattled Ongoro quits the Orange Party, and this happened within a span of 12 to 18 hours. Nominated Senator Elizabeth Ongoro, being disciplined by the ODM Disciplinary Committee. She was fined 1 million shillings for the chaos that saw 2 supporters die in Kasarani between her supporters and those of TJ Kajwang. But it did not seem to rattle her. She was on to the next party 24 hours later. Let's begin with you, Ndegwa. Your thoughts on this?
Michelle, I'm a bit uncomfortable with the way these things are done in this country. We have good laws, but we have very poor implementers of those laws. You see, why did the Political Parties Act have it that it would be proper for political parties to internally discipline their members? The purpose of that legislation was to clean our politics and sanitize our politics. So, if a person has committed a crime in ODM, it is still a crime in any other political party because that party has been registered pursuant to that particular Political Parties Act. So, if what Elizabeth Ogoro did in ODM was wrong in ODM, it should also be wrong in NASA, it should be wrong in TNA, it should be wrong in Jubilee, it should be wrong in ANC. So what we are seeing here is it's the inability to realize the institutions that we have created and to make the institutions work. The registrar of political parties should not have accepted the registration of Elizabeth Ogoro as a member of ANC. Why? Because she has failed in one political party. It's unfortunate that we have no seriousness in the political parties that we have established, and I agree with Dismas when he calls them special purpose vehicle. The law then needs to be amended probably to say that if you have been expelled in one policy, who is watching us, who is touching these issues, who is highlighting these issues? Because despite what she did, she will still become, she is now a candidate, she has been given a nomination certificate, and she's going to run for that seat.
Right. I mean, nobody likes calling political parties special purpose vehicles like you do. So the ODM train seems to have dropped Elizabeth Ongoro before her destination, and now she's boarded the NC train, which is, hopefully going to take her where she wants to go. Question is, adding on to what Ndegwa says, what does this say about the opposition outfit, NASA? Because ANC, ODM, Wiper, Ford Kenya are all supposed to be somewhat in sync with regard to disciplining their members.
Let's look at the genesis of this matter. Elizabeth Ongoro wanted to run during the last elections, and she was prevailed upon by the ODM leadership to put her ambitions on a freezer. That's how she got the nomination. So I think she's been maximizing for the last 4 years, waiting to run in Ruaraka. And when she expresses her interest in public that I want to run in Ruaraka, somebody from the ODM headquarters says to her, wait a minute, you are not going to run. Our preferred candidate is TJ Kajwang. So, of course, she goes to Orange House to demonstrate and say what is happening, wanting to establish facts, and in the process causes a commotion. And we go back to the fact that our political parties, as you say, special purpose vehicles, they're not institutions. Because who gives ODM the powers to tell a member who wants to run in Ruaraka that, wait a minute, you cannot run in Ruaraka. However, go select another constituency you want to run. Maybe you can go run in Mathare, you can go run in Malindi, wherever it is. I think for Elizabeth Ongoro, her constitutional rights were violated at ODM. Because if you want to run in Ruaraka and you meet the bare minimum, why can't they allow her to go to Ruaraka and do the primaries with TJ Kajwang? So that once her name has been gazetted and she gets a beating, now she can't move to another political party unless she wants to run as an independent. For me, I would appreciate what Ongoro has done. And all politicians in Kenya are very crafty. I would actually, if I was running for a political seat, and in my political party that I've been supporting for a long time, if they tell me that I can't run in a constituency that I so desire, I'll look for an alternative. But you see now that's the information in the public domain. However, we know from inside sources that there are personal differences between Elizabeth Ongoro and some people of rank within ODM. That's the reason why nobody wants her to take an elective seat. However, When you look at the NASA, whether or not they're a cohesive body, whether or not they can implement discipline across the board, Ongoro is not the first person. You recall Kenya's High Commissioner to Tanzania, Ali Chirao Makwere. When he resigned, he came to Kenya. He was received by Governor Joe. He was in ODM. A few days later, he jumped to Wiper. So we don't have that discipline. And it tells you that the current crop of leadership we have, their interest is not to serve Wanjiku. Their interest is to run for public offices, and they want to stay at some powerful position. That's why you see, like, for instance, when Sakaja wanted to run for governor for Nairobi, when it was not possible, he decided to go and run for Senate. A clear indication that anybody running for political office today is not running because he's got some powerful philosophies that are going to take Kenya to the next level. No, they're merely interested in political office, number one. And then number two, maybe we should just disband these political parties in Kenya and allow everybody to run as an independent. Because, you know, every Kenyan is a taxpayer. You work hard, you make some money, it's, you know, KRA takes a portion of it, gives it to ODM, and Raila Odinga decides to use the money as he so desires without respect to the Kenyan constitution. And I really think that's bad political manners. And maybe the reason why we need to look at that chapter 6 again. And earlier on you were asking, what happened to chapter 6? Chapter 6 was diluted by members of parliament because they know that chapter 6, as it's captured in the constitution, without the accompanying acts, they would actually not make it because most of them are in charge of CDF funds, and they've played around with those resources. That's why they said that even if you're found guilty by a lower court, you can still run to office till you've exhausted all appeal mechanisms.
Right.
And these guys, they know how to play with the system to ensure that a case can take as long as 20 years. Like, for instance, and may his soul rest in peace, David Mwiraria has died, and we don't know what happened to Anglo Leasing, and we don't know whether or not he stole, and we don't know whether or not somebody is going to be punished for that.
So,
May I say something,
yes, please
Michelle, while still on it? That I don't know whether Kenyans are also desirous of having good leadership. I don't know. Because they seem to ride, and you'll see hooliganism is where people are so much jovial. That's when they celebrate much. The question is there any time that meritocracy shall ever matter in the Kenyan politics? That's a debate probably that needs to be sparked. We have good laws. The question is how and who is going to help us implement these good laws.
Right, yes. Right. I'd like us to also focus on page 6 of the Nation there. Electoral agency receives 4,000 gadgets for identifying voters. Good news for the IEBC, but let's tie this to the ongoing party primaries. Because KT News has been live, and time and time again, we hear even voters asking the clerks, how are we going to tell that so-and-so has already voted? How are you going to account to ensure that somebody doesn't come and vote twice? Now, let's focus on the issue of Busia. Like you mentioned, Dismas. I mean, more than 80% voter turnout. Well, during the general elections, it's usually even 40%. And claims of rigging have also been raised here. And this is ODM party, the same party whose leaders have been bashing the ruling Jubilee administration for rigging claims in the coming August elections. What lessons can Kenyans learn from this, especially supporters of ODM?
Well, we know now, you know, ODM has been accusing Jubilee of having dead voters. And now Governor Ojamong has actually confirmed that you can have dead voters within an ODM region.
Right.
And I think as we move to the next election, it's going to be very interesting on how people are going to read the results. Because speaking to some ODM governors, as they prepare for the primaries, they're saying they're not going to be releasing the results from their strongholds till they actually establish the voting patterns. And this is what Governor Ojamong did, because he ensured that for Teso, where he's got irrational support, the results are not out. So he waited for and again, you know, when you go to Busia, it's very interesting that you've got the Luya ethnic community and the Tesos. So he sat pretty at his residence, and he waited for the Luya numbers to come out. And when he saw that this gentleman has got about 79, he said, okay, how do I beat him? From my 39, let me top up by maybe another 60,000 votes for him to go to the 100 mark. And this is what is going to be happening in the general elections, unless we are very careful, that these agents and people may connive with IBC to ensure that they don't release their results in good time. And one hopes that KPMG is going to do a very good job, because now they've started, you know, cleaning up the register to ensure that we get out the dead voters. And then number two, as Ndego has indicated, one hopes that we are going to implement the electoral laws as they are. Because right now, every commissioner and staffer, even a contractor for IBC, attracts individual criminal responsibility. Because in the past, the returning officer or presiding officer would announce the loser as the winner, as the returning officer here in Busia attempted to do yesterday. And he said, I'm going to make the announcement. If you are unhappy, you can go to court or you can go to the electoral board. And I'm hoping then that with the clean voter register and with that individual criminal responsibility, that people are going to be very serious on this. However, again, the fines imposed for breaking the rules around the electoral process are again very low. Because in some aspects, you break the law, you are supposed to go in for 1 month, or maybe you pay a fine of 1 million. For somebody who wants to see the election, again, 1 million may not be anything to worry over.
Right.
But really, one hopes that at the end of the day, with this equipment now in Kenya, it's going to be possible to ensure that the numbers are very accurate. And also, given the fact that the numbers that we're going to be getting from the constituencies are final, then there's a very high probability of a credible election. But now it's incumbent on all the presidential candidates to ensure that they've got their agents spread countrywide. Like, for instance, if for Jubilee, if you don't have people, say, in Kisumu, in the NASA strongholds, that may compromise the integrity of the election. So it's up to the political parties to be sure that they are sufficiently prepared. And something else which I saw in Busia that we need to be worried of is when they were about to announce the results, I saw people drawing guns, which is really unacceptable. Yeah, there was a gun drama, which is bad. And also the same happened in Machakos for an MCS seat. A simple MCS seat, you saw guns being drawn. And one hopes that the Inspector General of Police is actually watching this, and they will be very proactive to ensure that during the actual election, we do not see people drawing guns and probably leading to death. Very
pertinent concerns there, because many times this is a rehearsal of the real thing that will happen in August. And Dengwa, yes. I'd like to draw your attention to page 5 of the Weekend Star. And this is an article here by Barack Muluka on how nominations, as they are happening now, are a shambolic mockery of democracy in our country. Yes. There's been a lot of tension by Kenyans, of course, learning from the 2007 fiasco of how the 2017 elections will play out. With the nominations going on now, what is the state of democracy in Kenya?
May I say that the state of democracy in Kenya is in shambles? It has collapsed. There is no state of democracy in Kenya, and there is no democracy in Kenya. The democracy that we speak of is only democracy that is written in books and not democracy in practice. The democracy as it ought to be, not as it is. Why do I say this? I say this because democracy has so many infrastructures and structures. For you to deliver democracy in a country, it does not, it's not just based on how good laws you have legislated. It also depends on the political goodwill to deliver that particular democracy, both from all the stakeholders in the political arena. For instance, with the IBC, is one of the key and fundamental institutions that's supposed to deliver democracy. Remember, we all speak democracy in the sense of universal suffrage, and the referee of this universal suffrage is the IBC. They have now told us they have procured over 4,000 identification gadgets to identify people during the political process. The question is, IBC is a commission. It's not a commission that is just supposed to register voters and oversee elections. It should also be able to give Kenyans a feedback of why did the gadgets fail in 2013. Today, we are moving into 2017 elections without knowing why did the gadgets fail, because there was no feedback that was given to us. They have told us they have procured. They have not given us a report which we are entitled to on how the gadgets will not be able to fail in on 8th of August 2017. As we move on, I do not know whether the current commissioners of the IBC have acquainted themselves with the Kliegler's report. The Kliegler's report is a fundamental document that will help this country move forward insofar as universal suffrage is an issue.
Right.
It addressed a lot of fundamental issues in terms of election preparedness. Because a democracy cannot be delivered by a body that is not properly prepared. In my view, I'm having a bit of apprehension whether or not it's a democracy that is in play or a mockery of democracy, as Barack says. And I agree with him. For instance, the IBC is supposed to have outlined and told us why, or given us the report, and actually the ODM or Raila Odinga was asking for that report because it's a periodical report that's supposed to be given to Kenyans after every elections, in 90 days of announcement of the elections. To date, we do not know what happened.
All right.
We are going to the same IBC, the same laws, the same commissions, without having known what happened.
All right.
So in my view, we're having a problem, and democracy is actually at trial in this particular election, and it's a trial even with the political parties, and whatever is happening in ODM is not unique to Jubilee. It will still happen again.
Of course,
because
yes, we're yet to see the primaries for Jubilee, which will kick off this Friday. Dismas, unfortunately, you will not have to, no time to give your final comments for now, but Dismas Makua and Ndegwa Njiru will stay on with us as we give you special, comprehensive coverage of this next phase of the ODM primaries taking place in Narok, Kakamega, as well as Turkana. We will have our reporters on the ground, Duncan Haemba, Chris Tairu, Jeff Kirui, as well as Mrimi Mwangi, giving us all the live details as and when it happens, because this is KTN News, where we give you the whole story. We've come to a close on Weekend Express. We thank you for watching, but do stay with us. We'll be back